Welcome to Red and Yellow, the podcast about all things to do with refereeing at grassroots level, looking at the laws of football, speaking to guests, and trying to help you become a better referee, with Adam Humphreys and me, Ed Connell.
Well, hello, Edward. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you, Adam. How are you?
I'm not too bad. How was Marrakech?
Marrakesh was amazing. Yeah, really, really good. I'd never been before, and I would highly recommend it. I did lots of exciting things like camel riding and cookery class and hot air ballooning and all-terrain vehicle driving. So yeah, very, very good.
Wow. And if you want to see an image of Ed wearing a full headscarf next to a camel, then that is available on his Instagram.
It certainly is. It's a good look, though. Do you not think?
I think it's. I'm actually disappointed you've not still got it on for this recording.
Is it a good look because it basically only shows my eyes?
Exactly. Maybe you need to change that as your dating profile.
Bloody hell!
I know. Well, I've started out strong today.
2 minutes in, and I'm being abused again.
Don't bring up that word. That word's triggering for referees. Speaking of which, I've got an interview with Sky News tomorrow.
Have you? That's
yeah,
very exciting. Is that in relation to the letter that you wrote to the FA that you read out on the last podcast?
It's in relation to all that kind of stuff. Yeah, they wanted to do a story on abuse to referees. I don't know how much I'm allowed to say, but hey ho, I'm recording it tomorrow morning, so they haven't said it's I don't know. Yeah, anyway. So yeah, and there was a journalist who wanted to do like a piece about abuse to refereeing and stuff, and we're chatting tomorrow morning, which is very exciting. Tomorrow morning for you.
Going to promote our podcast, I hope.
Oh, mate. I mean, personal training, thegymstarter.com. But then the podcast, yes. No, I'm joking. It would be a mix of both, of course.
Good. Can I just say something on a slightly somber note before we get going proper?
Oh, yeah, sorry. Yeah, of course you
can. So a friend of mine called Kenyatta Scott unfortunately passed away today, and you knew him, or certainly met him, Adam, because he was one of the referees as well as in Rome. But he'd been suffering from cancer for a fair period of time. Unfortunately, passed away today, and I just sort of want to pay tribute to him because he'd been a refereeing in the sort of LGBTQ world for almost 20 years, going to all the tournaments around the world. I know that back in his home in the US, he'd been a soccer coach for many, many years, as well as being a refereeing mentor and a referee. And the sort of LGBTQ footballing community is really feeling very, very sad this evening because he was a larger-than-life character, much loved, and he will be very sorely missed. And so I just want to sort of pay tribute to him. Yeah, there we go.
I mean, my overriding memory of Kenyatta was getting on that bus. I think the bus was taking us to. Sorry if you can hear that banging. I'm in a cafe on the Gold Coast, just trying to make sure I get the podcast done as well as I'm committed. But my overriding memory of Kenyatta was he was on a bus taking us somewhere. I think it was taking us to the venue, and he was just sat at the back. And all I can remember is his like big barrel laugh, and just he had this high energy that just kind of permeated out through the whole group. That was like the first time I met him, and he was a really lovely man. And I was very sad to see. I saw Ryan's post about him today, Ryan Atkin, and I think it's right that we mention him and hope his family are okay. And it's a big loss for the refereeing world.
Condolences to his family and friends. But anyway, I'm afraid I'm losing my voice a bit, so I'm feeling a bit run down. It's been a busy work week.
It's not not
been sleeping well.
Not the dreaded Rona, is it?
No, I hope not, because I'm sort of vaxxed to the max. So I think we're all good on that.
Is that the new phrase? Is it vaxxed to the max? How long till Elon Musk? How long till Elon Musk bans out on Twitter?
Well, there are benefits to being 50 or over because I think I'm now deemed vulnerable.
You are not 50 or over.
Of course I am. I was 50 in January.
Edward, that's craziness.
I know. You're telling me.
See, to me, in my eyes, you're still only 49 years old.
And see, I make all my disparaging remarks to you off air before we start recording.
Like and then just for men.
And then you just store them up until we're actually live, which is very, very cruel.
You know what the difference is, Edward? I'm a pro at this and you are not. And one day you'll learn the lessons.
Anyway,
right. What's on the agenda?
So I thought we would do I think we sort of settled into a bit of a format, really, haven't we? We sort of tend to look at the news section. We sort of dip into our post bag to see if there's anything we want to chat about there. Then we talk about the very exciting law of the week, which is you'll no doubt recall, is Law 6, which is the very thrilling title, The Other Match Officials. And then we'll have some fun facts, which, I mean, I pretty much exhausted my refereeing fun facts last week, so it's been a bit of a difficult week.
Can I just say, we have a jingle for the fun facts now, and I hope everyone's enjoying it. You didn't like it, which I was most offended about. Well, it took me a whole day to put that together.
It just had sort of smatterings of amateurism about it, but
I'm very point. Appreciative. Like, it's meant to be a bit tongue-in-cheek.
Wow. Another dig.
Not at all. I like the fact this is like clearly just two guys who are just talking nonsense basically about refereeing. Exactly. Like, I'm sorry, look, I'm not being funny. If the BBC want to sponsor us, then they're more than welcome to, and we can bring in professional audio editing. But I've never done a day of audio editing like courses in my life, so I don't know what to do. I'm just making it up as I go along.
Do you know, I see much more of you now than I did when you lived 15 miles away.
unless I needed somebody very official to sign some documents for me.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Oh, dear. So news. The only item of news that I was going to bring up, and I'm slightly reticent when I do it because it's been something we've been talking about on Facebook this week with lots of other referees, but it was the incident that happened at the Stevenage match. And in fact, I've just posted it from our Facebook account this evening, the footage. So if anybody wants to go away having listened to this and have a look. But in short, what happens is the keeper is in possession of the ball. There is one of the attacking Stevenage players who, for one reason or another, we don't know how, has ended up in the actual goal mouth, sort of beyond the sort of touchline. So he's actually in the goal and kind of, I think he's like kneeling down or something.
It's not the touchline, is it? It'd be the goal line. It's beyond the goal line.
But he's like kneeling down, isn't he? I think, and
he's doing his. He's not doing his boots up. He's hiding. There's been many photos of it posted. He's hiding. Let's call it what it is.
Okay. Right. So, and what happens then is the goalkeeper, not realizing that there's still a player in his goal mouth behind him, releases the ball from his hands, throws it in front of him with a view to being about to sort of kick it out. And then the Stevenage player then sort of runs around, nicks the ball from him and scores a goal. And the winning goal. The winning goal, yeah. And the goal's been given, and it's the footage was posted on a refereeing forum, I think, and then we sort of got involved in having
it was posted. I saw it on Stevenage Football Club's Facebook feed, I think, or something, and then somebody and then I posted it. Yeah, I think so. Anyway, it went on and on and on, and I posted it in quite a few groups this week to get opinions and see what was going on. And it's been a very interesting week fielding questions and trying to figure it out. What
I think is really quite important, and it's the point you made when we were chatting earlier on this evening on WhatsApp, which is it does just show you sometimes that even though there are these laws of the game, it's not an easy job because the referee had to make a decision about whether that goal stood, there and then. And we've mulled it over. We've sort of entered into debate on sort of Facebook accounts of people about what we think happened. We've had to go back and look at the laws. I mean, I'm still not 100% sure that I know where I stand on this. I've got a fairly good idea.
I think, I think that this is what's really important about this thing. The goal stood, fine, whatever. Like, technically, I think letting the goal stand isn't wrong in law. And so the referee is fine to allow that. I think with hindsight, he might have chosen something different, but in the middle of a game in that moment, then I understand why he let the goal stand. I do get that. I think I mean, I went back and forth on it. The first time I watched it, I was like, he's offside. He can't be in that position on the pitch. And then and then we looked into the offside law, didn't we? Which will be coming up on the podcast. I bet you can't wait. And there's a whole element of that law that's all about whether the ball has exited the penalty area or not, which I thought brought that offside decision into play. But obviously, because it's not, I've since found out that because it's not come from the attacker's own player, that null and voids the offside law. So then you're looking at other laws that it might or might not be. And then we got into debates about, the field of play and unsporting behavior, which is where I think I would have gone with it. I mean, I think when I watched it, you're watching it and you're going, there's something wrong with that. Like something in my football antenna is going, that's not normal. I've never seen
it just feels unfair.
I've never seen that before. So something's wrong. And if something's wrong, you need to logically plot your way through it to figure out what is wrong and how do you get to that conclusion. And we've had days to get to that conclusion. And the referee and the linesman or the assistants on that day had like 5 seconds to try and get there. But yeah, I think something is wrong with it. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I think that's my sort of settled position now. I got very hung up on whether or not he was on the field of play and whether or not if he was off the field of play, whether he then needed permission to come back on the field of play. And I'm still struggling with this because the field of play is the goal line. And so being inside the actual goal mouth, he is off the field of play
without the referee's permission.
Correct. And then if you're applying the law strictly, he needs permission to re-enter the field of play.
Correct.
And I kind of dug around to make sure that was right, to make sure the field of play did not extend into the goal mouth. And I'm pretty confident it doesn't. But then I thought to myself, when there's a goal mouth scramble, for example, or, and someone falls back into the goal mouth, they don't have to, no one would suggest they would get permission or require permission to play on.
So this comes down to implicit and explicit or implied, and I don't know what the implied is, consent from the referee. Okay. And this is really nuanced. So I don't think I've probably ever thought about this until this moment, but in open play, if somebody falls into the goal mouth, dusts himself off, gets back onto the pitch, and there's not the potential of an issue arising from that, then implicitly the referee is giving you his permission. And he's giving you his permission by not stopping play to say, no, you're not allowed to do that. Because if somebody enters you can't stop someone entering the field of play. So the way in which you show someone you're not giving them permission is by stopping play and then sanctioning the fact they've come on to the field of play. So you could argue this is why the law stood, because the referee's implied, or this is why the goal stood, the referee has implied his permission, that he's not seen an issue with it. So therefore he thinks he's given him his permission to come on without overly stating he's got his permission. Now, what I would say in that instance is if the guy was to not be hiding in the goal, and if he was to be within 5 to 6 yards of the goalkeeper, or maybe even 10 yards of the goalkeeper, and the referee was aware he was there, the referee, without a shadow of a doubt, would have told him to step away from the goalkeeper while the goalkeeper still had possession of the ball to stop a potential issue from occurring.
Yeah.
Now, so therefore, I believe there's no way the referee knew the guy was there. So if the referee didn't know the guy was there, he can't have his permission to re-enter the field of play because he didn't know he was there. So the next thing, so for all intents and purposes, he could have been like a streaker. He could have been somebody not involved in the match, and therefore you have to stop play if they've interfered with play. And technically he has. He wasn't allowed on the pitch. He's come round, he's interfered with play, and therefore I think really, he didn't have the referee's permission to re-enter the field. But then having said that, he did have his permission because the referee didn't stop play and allowed the goal to continue. So therefore the referee isn't technically wrong in law. I personally would have handled it differently.
Yeah, and I think your view is that, and I think it's probably mine as well now, having watched it a few times and followed the debate online. I mean, this clip has had sort of millions of views, and it's had sort of a lot of people sort of debating about it. But I think I'm like you. I've got this innate sense that it just felt wrong. It felt unfair. And it seems to be the easy way to dealt with that. I say easy with hindsight, but would have been to consider it to be unsportsmanlike conduct.
Which takes away, and if you do that, that takes away every single argument there is. That takes away whether the goal line or the goal mouth is part of the field of play or not. It takes away offside. It takes away every issue. It's just unsportsmanlike. Creeping up on a goalkeeper who didn't know he was there. It's just unsportsmanlike. And you could argue there's other unsportsmanlike things. Like I remember Wayne Rooney doing a corner and Giggs like touched it to him and nobody knew, and then he took the corner, he swung it in, they scored a goal. Like that's a bit unsportsmanlike. But I think this felt a little more insidious. This felt a little bit more like I'm hiding, I'm going to surprise you. Like I just don't think anyone wants to see that in football, other than obviously the Stevenage fans and obviously the Stevenage team.
I think that's that. I mean, if you read the sort of thread, and I'm just remind myself, there's been 8,400 comments on this post.
Yeah, I'm not reading that
on the Stevenage Football Club Facebook page. So and it generally does fall into two camps, which is Stevenage fans saying, "Good on you, well done." And then everybody else sort of saying, it just doesn't feel right to me. I can't work out what the problem is. And then that's when the debate's been triggered and lots of people are sort of discussing it. But yeah, I've reposted it. It's had 8,700 shares already, the Facebook post by Stevenage.
It's a shame it wasn't our Facebook post that got shared that much.
2.8 million views those had. I mean, it's
common listeners, share our work, share our work.
Oh dear. Anyway, so that was the only item of refereeing news. I mean, I don't really want to talk about the World Cup, if I'm honest.
I was going to say to you, should we bring that up? Like, go on, you carry on for me.
Well, I'm a massive football fan, and like most football fans, we kind of live for these big events and the Euros and the World Cup. And normally, I'm super excited about the World Cup, but I've just got no enthusiasm for this World Cup at all. And it's born out of a few things. I mean, obviously, I reminded myself this morning, I tweeted a Guardian article that I was interviewed about in 2010 when Qatar got awarded the World Cup, and I was being asked for comment on behalf of the organisation I was then chair of, the Gay Football Supporters Network. And I was just saying, I couldn't quite believe that the governing body had given a World Cup to a country. And I was obviously primarily concerned about LGBTQ plus rights. And I was sort of saying, how can you possibly give it to a country where it's still illegal to have same-sex marriages, punishable with imprisonment, in some cases death? And I was told when I did a lot of interviews about this at the time, and everybody kept saying to me, well, you've got to give it to countries to help them on their journey to, change. Nothing's changed in the 12 years. I mean, there's been no assurances sought. And in fact, even more worrying, there's been a lot of discussion today about, what the position is for LGBTQ plus fans going to the World Cup, in light of the fact that we were given all these assurances about, you won't be arrested for having a rainbow flag, you won't be arrested for sort of same-sex relationships. Well, they also said you'd have alcohol, all the football stadiums. And then today, or yesterday, the Qatari authorities turned around and said, yeah, well, we've changed our mind about that. So, I heard Jack Murley on Radio 5 talking about, where does that leave us? What the assurances we've been given about safety of fans. Does that mean they can change their mind about that now as well? Because they seem to have taken the view that they've got unilateral control over this event and not FIFA. And so I'm obviously upset about that. I'm upset about the migrant worker situation, about women's rights. And I just feel we've rewarded a country that ought not to have been rewarded with this, the world's greatest spectacle. And I've got no enthusiasm for it at all, I'm afraid.
Yeah, no, I'm completely flat about it as well. For many of the same reasons you said. I mean, I actively would love to boycott it, but it puts me in a bit of a dilemma. And this just kind of goes to show just how nuanced the whole thing is. And it also goes to show how hard it is to take these political stances for so many people in the world, right? Like, it's different for me because I've not been directly influenced by, you know, like an LGBT struggle. Like, I'm straight, you know, I've never had to kind of worry about that and deal with that and stuff. Although many of my friends are, you know, I'm from the theatre, and, you know, like I've spent my entire life around all kinds of people, and love them all dearly because they're human beings. But I really want to openly say I'm going to boycott it. I'm going to have nothing to do with it. But then equally, like, I flew to Australia on Qatari Airlines because they were the cheapest option. And I know I'm going to have to fly back to London at some point, and chances are they might be the cheapest option again. And I can't in good faith say I'm going to boycott the World Cup based on all these human rights issues, which I do agree with, and then be like, yeah, but, you know, if it's going to save me £300, I'm still going to fly with Qatari Airways because I don't have £300 to spare. I'm not in that kind of privileged position. And so I'm finding it really, I like, you can probably tell, like, I feel like I'm just in a rock and a hard place with it. Like, I'm not going to actively watch your games. If anyone sends, I might just see how England are doing from time to time. I'd happily, like, look at any referee and stuff that's going on for the sake of the podcast and stuff, but I'm not excited for it. I don't think it's in you know, when I got into refereeing, I saw myself as a guardian of the sport, as like a guardian of the game. I wanted to encourage people to play the game properly. I wanted to, you know, protect it somewhat and do my little bit for the sport. And it does kind of feel like the rug's just being pulled from under your feet with a World Cup like this. And then also when you look into, like, I've been watching documentaries, and there's a great documentary on or a BBC podcast called Power Play that's just come out. That's all about how Sepp Blatter got the Qatari World Cup handed to Qatar, and all the, you know, the corruption and stuff that went in with it and things. And so, you know, like, the whole thing is just, it's been undermined from the start, and it's going to continue to be undermined. So, you know, like, I wish I was financially able and privileged enough to make a strong enough stance on it. But unfortunately I'm not. That being said, you know, hopefully that gives some relief to people who might be listening to this, who are in my position as well, who are like, you know, I really want to make a stance, but I'm not sure politically, like, I'm not sure if at some point in the future it'll make me a hypocrite. And that's just something we all have to kind of battle with, I suppose. But no, I definitely stand in allegiance with everyone who disagrees with human rights and stuff like that against them.
You know, I'd have loved to have gone to this World Cup. But I mean, I had to fly through Doha not long ago for work reasons, and it was a work trip that somebody else had booked, so I had to fly through Doha, and I had to seek advice about, you know, whether there was a risk for me transiting through Doha, because you Google my name, what comes up is a whole lot of Middle Eastern websites where it's, you know, about my comments. And that might sound a bit paranoid.
He says Googling Ed Connell right now.
But
no,
you know,
it's just, you could be on their hit list.
Yeah, well, I mean, but some people might think, well, you're being totally irrational. But I genuinely was so concerned that I sought advice because, I mean, like,
you can't. I mean, the clip from Danish TV of the guy doing a piece to camera and that getting suppressed. Like, if they're not willing to recognize free speech, no matter what country you're in, it is a little bit risky. So, it is what it is. We can't change it. It's going to happen. Many people are going to enjoy it. And the sad thing about it is it's a hot button topic right now. In 2 years' time, it'll all be forgotten and everyone will move on, and we'll just start focusing on the Euros again, and away we go. And that's kind of it, and that's the sad truth of it. And I think politicians and governing bodies know that, and that's just the way we go.
Well, there we go. So that's the World Cup, which kicks off tomorrow, my time, today, your time. Yeah.
Didn't know that.
Well, have you ever been so underwhelmed about an opening match? Qatar versus, I think, was it Ecuador or something?
That's another thing they changed, wasn't it? To make sure Qatar had the opening game.
Well, I think they always get the opening game, but I think they brought it forward so that it was the only game. I think it's normally, I don't know.
Right, okay. There was some issue with it. Anyway, right. Should we go to the post bag and talk about more fun things?
Oh yeah, let's go to the post bag. Yeah, absolutely.
Right. What's in the post bag, Edward? Do we need a little jingle for the post bag now?
We probably do need a little jingle for the post bag.
Postman Pat. If you could. Postman Pat.
Not quite that amateurish.
Right.
But, well, we've had a few questions, and again, thank you very much to everybody who's written in. Also, we can't deal with all of them, but we sort of tried to pick out some that we thought might be good to deal with. So I think
there's that one from I got on Instagram from one of our loyal fans, and she messages me quite regularly about the podcast, which is lovely. So I'd like to deal with that for her because I promised her I would.
Let's go for that.
So this is the story. So I had an under-12s game last weekend. I'll skip straight to half-time, as after that is when it all happened. Everything was running smoothly, and I had 2 club assistants who were parents who were performing as well as the average parent would, I thought anyways. So it got to a few minutes into the second half, and one of the assistants signaled for an offside. Now, personally, I didn't think it was. Therefore, I overruled his decision. Now, in brackets, now I realized that I probably shouldn't have done that, and I should have been 110% sure, but I was only about 95% sure. Whether the decision was right or wrong, his reaction was still not appropriate. Therefore, I'm going to focus on what he did rather than the decision made. So that's good. So after I overruled it, he shouted over to me. Nothing aggressive, but just saying that he called it as offside. I quickly gestured to him that I said it wasn't and carried on with focusing on the gameplay. A minute later, a player grabs my attention. I've just got this image of like this 12-year-old girl like pulling a referee's shirt and pointing over to the touchline. Like he's thrown his flag on the floor, which is what he did. The assistant threw his flag on the floor as the club didn't provide any. He threw the referee's flags on the floor.
Yeah.
As the club didn't provide any, started kicking off at the home manager and myself, the referee, whilst I was trying to reorganize a throw that had to be retaken. He said, if you're not going to listen to me, then why should I even be doing this job? And other nonsense. This is when the home manager gets involved and is backing me up, saying, she's a referee, she's allowed to overrule your decision, whether it's right or wrong, which was nice of him, I agree. I now realize that I should have handled it slightly differently. But my main question is, ignoring whether the decision was right or wrong, how would you or Ed deal with that situation? She also goes on to say, also, I didn't report him in the end. So he apologized and told me that he agrees he shouldn't have behaved in that way. And it was just in the heat of the moment, passion in inverted commas, if you go back to what I read out last week. I don't think it's acceptable to act like that in an under-12s game. I completely agree. It doesn't set a good example for the young players. I completely agree with her. Right. So what's your opinion on that, Edward?
Well, I mean, it is not dissimilar to the sorts of experiences I had doing refereeing youth games, where some of the behaviour of the parents was just outrageous. And I know people get passionate about watching their children play football, but I mean, at the end of the day, you know that you're at a children's game and you're an adult, and I find it so desperately disappointing that people feel the need to behave in this way because the referees overruled their decision. I mean, it's a tough one. I mean, the first question I was going to throw back to you was, she didn't report it, and do you think that was the right thing to do or not?
I don't think we can be in a situation to judge because 1, we don't know how aggressive he was. 2, we don't know if there was more swearing involved. 3, we don't know how disruptive it was. 4, we don't know how threatened she felt. 5, we don't know if it was just like a kind of like a teamwork issue, as opposed to, and the reason she didn't report it, and this is why she didn't report it, is 1, she's got doubt over the decision that she made. And 2, she feels like she probably could have handled it better, and therefore it doesn't require a report because she feels like she's partly to blame for it happening. That's why it wasn't reported.
Fair enough. That's reasonable.
Whether I agree or not is a whole other issue. I think we should probably get into the habit of, and if you're a grassroots referee listening to this, I think we should probably get into the habit of over-reporting rather than under-reporting. And even if in your report you write things like, I feel like I was partly to blame for this situation, but regardless of that, I still think this behavior needs to be drawn to the attention of the authorities so that a word can be said or had with the club about future conduct, etc., etc. The club is to be praised because the manager backed me up on that as well. Like, outline the whole situation, but let the authorities know so that then the authorities can turn around and actually have a conversation with the club about what was good, what was bad, and slowly over time, like if you make reporting more of a collaborative process rather than just like a blaming process or a disciplinary process, then things will get better.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. I mean, it's a difficult decision to make, is it? Because, like you say, she probably doesn't want us to reveal that she wasn't sure about her decision. But I also can't help but feel that if you don't report it, then if something like this happens again or something more serious happens again, had you reported that incident, made that have sort of prevented something else escalating? I don't know. I kind of feel like you that you can't really over-report for these things.
You also have to remember that I'm not sure how old she is, but she's not old and tired like you and I are, and so standing up for yourself in that situation and things, it can be a bit more difficult. You don't want repercussions, and she also says that he apologized, so she felt like she resolved it there and then, which is fair enough.
Yeah, I mean, she was best placed to.
Can I just say, she also goes on to say, as a fairly new and young referee, having a grown man who's bigger, stronger than me shouting at me about a decision he's made is quite daunting, and that's where I froze. But after having the experience of a situation now, I'm going to handle it differently in the future. So I totally empathise with that as well.
And I think that the mere fact that she's describing how it made her feel even makes me think even more that it ought to have been reported.
No, I'm not saying it didn't need to be reported, but I understand why she didn't.
How would you have dealt with things as they unravelled?
So the reason a club assistant throws his flags on the floor, and to be fair, I've even had it with professional assistant referees, or not professional ones, but like neutral referees. The reason they throw their toys out of the pram is because they feel like they've not been heard. They feel like they're not part of the process. They feel like you've just ignored them, and therefore they feel insignificant. Okay, so in this situation, what I'd have done is the most important thing when you're working with people in this situation, it goes with players as well, but is make sure everyone feels like they're contributing to the game. Okay, and so when an assistant gives a decision, I would always acknowledge it. I would always say thank you. Now here, what's lucky here is I believe the goal was scored, right? Is that right? So it got to a few minutes, assistant signaled for an offside. Oh no, it didn't. Everything was running smoothly too. So it got to a few minutes second half, one assistant signaled for an offside. No, a goal wasn't scored. Okay. So signaled for an offside and she didn't think it was offside. And that's okay. So what I would have done is, it's a lot easier if the ball then goes out of play, i.e. a goal, a corner, a throw in, because then you can just accept there's a natural stop in play. Then you could go over to the assistant and discuss the decision with him to make him feel like he's been heard, he's been felt, he's been understood. And then you can put forward your case and go, okay, I'm just going to start like this. Is that all right? And he might go, no, because I thought it was offside. And you go, okay, well, thanks for your opinion, and move on. Like the important thing to do here is to not ignore people. When you ignore people, that's when you get hissy fits. And these parents are precious, to say the least. So you've got to somehow you've got to feel like you're bringing them in, but equally that doesn't mean you have to take their decision. Yeah. Now, the issue you've got here is play carried on. And therefore, if play carried on and nothing significant came of it, then what I would do is at the next stop in play, I'd go over to him and I'd chat with him and just go, look, play carried on, nothing significant came of the offside. So it doesn't really matter whether I give it or not, does it? Thanks for the decision, but we'll just carry on playing. I hope that's okay. And then move on from there.
Yeah, no, I think that's very sensible. I think you're right about it's sort of the being ignored bit, which probably people find upsetting. And so if you can actually go and talk to and explain it, then all the better, really. And I guess if it was, I mean, this is probably not a proper interpretation of the law, but if it was an offside decision given, just inside the attacking half, and you thought it was wrong, but you thought, generally speaking, they'd been given the right ones, it might just be easier to give the decision. I know that's not, the right thing to do, but it's sometimes about sort of just managing everything. And that's not just managing the game, that's managing the people officiating on the touchline. That might be easy, but I don't know, I don't know where it was. It might be much closer to the goal. It might, you're worried about what's going to happen next.
I know, and I completely agree. I think sometimes, even if you think it's a bad offside, sometimes, especially with those kinds of assistants, sometimes it's best to just give the decision to avoid issues like this, even if you're not sure, even if you think it might be wrong. And then when the play, I mean, also, like, luckily she had the advantage of their 12-year-olds that are playing. So they're not going to know. They're not going to care whether you blow your whistle and give a soft offside or not. So just carry on. And if the managers or parents care, just go, well, he's your assistant. What does it matter? Like, just go talk to him about it. I asked him to do a job. He did it for me. Like, you can offload responsibility like that. The players ain't going to give you grief for it. So then you're just worried about fans, managers, parents, whatever. So then you can just kind of go, well, he's one of yours. So what does it matter? Or if it's the opposing team, just go, well, I gave you one as like, you can balance it a little bit better like that.
Yeah.
You know? It's about looking at a bigger context.
Yeah, completely. And if you have sort of gone with their decision on a couple of occasions and a half, and you're a bit dubious about it, you might want to say to them at half time, look, I've gone with your decisions. There've been 2 or 3 which I haven't necessarily agreed with, but can you just make sure you're in line with the second last man or whatever, because it'll just make it easier for me to accept your decisions. So they're kind of on notice, and they've got to sort of up their game a little bit perhaps as well. But again, these are all things that you learn from experience. It's about handling people and situations, and so there's you can't criticize how she reacted in the circumstances. She was to be doing her best, and I'm glad that she's kind of learned from it. Which is the main thing.
And I'm also glad she was willing to reach out, admit her own fallibility in the situation, be honest, and then we can give honest feedback. It's great.
Yeah, that's very, very good. What was one of the other questions you wanted to?
We got one on Facebook Messenger, which was awesome. What happens if a player refuses to leave for a sin bin or a red card?
Yeah, well, I mean, this does happen because often when people have been given a red card, the red mist has descended.
Not to me, I kick them off if I have to. No, I'm joking. I don't assault players.
People aren't always behaving rationally at that stage, and you do get people sort of refusing to leave the pitch or refusing to move away from the touchline. I mean, ultimately, you have the nuclear button, which you hope you never have to use, but it's good to be able to threaten it, which is you have the power to abandon the game. And I've found in the past when I've had a player who's sort of ranting the sideline and being sent off that won't go away, I've simply gone and spoken to their manager and said, need you to understand this game's not going to continue whilst they're still here. And if they refuse to move away, I will have no option but to abandon the game. And usually that then sort of resolves it. I don't think I've ever had a situation where I've ever had to abandon a game, in fact.
I've abandoned a few. Yeah.
Have you?
Yeah. Well, one when I was assaulted, I abandoned that one pretty quickly. When I was pushed over on the field of play. And I think I've abandoned a couple of others. Probably. Yeah. Maybe a couple for weather. I think I've abandoned 1 or 2, maybe 2. The one that sticks out was when I was assaulted in my head. But yeah, so for this, I think there's a 3-step approach, but there's also another little trick I want to share. So the first approach is obviously you give the red card and hope he leaves. The second approach is get the captain over and go, if you don't get rid of him, then I'm going to abandon this game, and I really couldn't care less. No, I've abandoned 2 games. I abandoned one in like the last minute. It was a level 4 game I was doing. Where was that? Down in Southend somewhere. And then the third step approach is obviously just abandon the whole game. So that's the kind of ladder you can work with. However, when it comes to giving red cards, so many referees, they can give them quickly, and they also give them while the situation is still hot. Right. So what I mean by that is like a punch-up's going on, and then the referee will get involved. They'll try and pull the player out a little bit, give a red card while there's still loads of players around him. And then, like the player's never going to leave the field of pitch because he's still got a few punches he wants to land before he leaves. Right. So, or even if it's like a bad tackle, even if it's like a really bad tackle, he's, that's going to create heat in the moment. And so if you give a red card in that moment, like when there's a lot of heat, it can sometimes not work because there's still a lot of pushing and shoving, and the player who's getting pushed or shoved, who did the tackle, still feels really aggrieved that he's now being attacked by other people, and then you're giving him a red card. It just gets a bit messy and kind of it's just not clean cut, right? So there is an argument to be had that a quick red card can diffuse a situation, but not often when you've got other players piling in, okay? And so what I personally do, and there's a great clip at Highbury, I think it was Peter Ellery, Nigel Winterburn, I think it was, for Arsenal. He went in, tough tackle and everything else. And he got Nigel Winterburn over. He walked him basically the length of the pitch, was chatting to him about everything, was talking about, whatever, I don't know what, I think he was talking about his breakfast, what he's going to have for dinner and everything else. Got him right in front of the tunnel, and then gave him the red card. And Nigel Winterburn had no idea it was coming. And because he was right in front of the tunnel, he had one place to go, and that was through the tunnel. And if he didn't, then like Peter Ellery was like, I've got all the power here I need. I've taken my time. I've marched him off where he needs to go. I had a red card last year in a local derby that was a very hot game. And I did the same thing. I was like, I had a really bad tackle. Guy missed the penalty. He was angry. 3 minutes later, he jumps in on someone. Took me a while to see that it was a red card, just because this was like my third or fourth game back. And I was like, I haven't seen one of these in a while. And then there was a bit of argy-bargy. So I calmed the situation down. I pulled him out and I said, look, come with me. So I walked him out. I was chatting to him. I went, what are you doing tonight? And he went, I'm probably going to go and have an early bath, aren't I? And I walked him to basically where the dugout, not where the dugouts were. I walked him to where the changing rooms were, basically, like the closest point on the pitch to where the changing rooms were. And then when I was in front of it, I gave him the red card. And that way I knew he wasn't about to walk through a bunch of players. He wasn't about to cause any more problems. I'd taken him out of any potential situations for his sake and the game's sake. And then he just had to literally take 2 steps and he was off the field of play. So that's kind of a good way of handling it. It's not always appropriate, but I think it is. I think more often than not, if you start taking those kinds of approaches to kind of calming a situation down first, making sure everyone on the pitch knows you know what's happened, knows you're about to deal with it, and then they see you actively dealing with it, then it will calm everything down a lot better. And it will also stop somebody from being able to refuse to leave the field of play, because they're right there anyway. And when they're isolated and they've got no support from anyone else and it's just you and them, and you're staring at him going, you really better bugger off this pitch, because if you don't, there's going to be all hell to pay. He knows he has one choice. So you have to take away their options, and you have to make them not feel humiliated. You have to make them feel powerless in that situation, and then you can control them a lot better.
I like the idea of not rushing in, because the sort of immediate temptation is, there's a red card offence and you're sort of wanting to jump in and give the red card straight away. But I can also see, having heard you talk about that could actually be quite inflammatory. And, it's just better just to take a bit of time. There's no rush to do that, is there? You can just sort of let things settle a bit. Also, if you're dishing up red cards, you can't really keep an eye on what else is going on as well. So it's just easy to keep watching.
Luckily as well, like, because I'm very, very vocal on the pitch, everyone knows that I'm going to be dealing with it. Like, everyone knows I'll be saying, no, look, I've got it. You go away. I don't need you. I've got this. Just go away for me, and then I can deal with it. And then when they see I'm controlling space with my arms, with my body language, with my voice, and I'm stopping players come to the perpetrator because I've got the perpetrator and that's the only person who matters, then they all know that I've got this. And the only reason people get involved is because they feel like they need justice. So if you can demonstrate to them that you're going to give justice, then that calms them down, and that will also calm the perpetrator down. And then you can deal with the perpetrator in a much more sane way.
Yeah, pretty good. I agree with all of that.
Lovely. Anything else? What was the worst game you ever refereed? My cousin asked this, so we better just quickly cover it.
The worst game I've ever refereed. Well, I don't really have sort of the same, thankfully, horror stories that you've had. Two really spring to mind. The one where I've spoken about before, the last time I refereed a youth game, because there wasn't really any problems on the pitch, but the parents of the pitch were just outrageous, and the comments that were coming my way, being made by the parents in front of their kids, were just shocking. And so it's not particularly dramatic, but I mean, it stuck out for me because it was the day that I decided I'm not going to do, youth football anymore.
Yeah.
And the other one is the occasion, again, I spoke about before, where I was, someone threatened they're going to break my legs and they're going to wait for me in the car park. And, that's quite shocking when it happens, Sunday afternoon, you're not expecting that sort of thing to take place. But yeah, so those are mine. I mean, I suspect yours are going to be a bit worse, aren't they? I mean, you're assault.
Yeah. I mean, I kind of split it into 2 categories. Like, one, there's games where I've just not felt like I've performed well and I've not felt good and I've not done a great job. There's a couple of those. Not many of those stick out. Sometimes, like, a couple of finals have never gone the way I've kind of hoped they'd go. And that's always difficult. They stick out because they're such important games. One of the worst games I ever did was also games where you have people on the pitch who you know personally. And when I first started out, I did a few of those, and then I had to send one of them off. And like, he was an old friend from church and stuff. And I was pally with a lot of the club, but I had to try and stay neutral. They're always difficult situations to be in. But I think the worst one was obviously when I got assaulted. And I've had a couple of others as well that just haven't been the nicest. But most of the time, a game doesn't go well for me if I'm not feeling good about myself. And then that just affects my performance, as it would. But, I mean, I can't exactly say it was Winchester FC versus the Dog and Duck FC. I would say this. I used to have to do Harold Hill quite a lot on the Brentwood Sunday League. And the owner of Harold Hill Football Club was, I'm not sure if it still is, a man called Ricky Shelvey, who has two sons, one of which is a Premier League footballer known as John Joe Shelvey. And Harold Hill were always very well behaved when it was, or not, they weren't very well behaved, but I used to get them a lot because they weren't very well behaved. But I used to be able to keep a lid on them. I used to be able to control them enough, and we'd be okay. I'd get through the 90 minutes, and sometimes that's all you need to do. Except if John Joe was there, you'd have all hell to pay. If John Joe was there, everyone in the club would just play up. They try and show off. I think one time he almost came on the pitch. Yeah, and if he was there and his brother was playing for the team as well, that was a pretty difficult situation as well. So anywhere, and there wasn't there a story this week as well about an ex-Premier League footballer who got away with he wasn't found guilty of abuse towards the referee because of something. I can't remember who the footballer was, but yeah. I would generally say if you're doing a game and there's an ex-Premiership footballer there, generally avoid it.
You just made me think, actually, because obviously a lot of the games I referee, I know lots and lots of the players, and that does bring real challenges, because I know from having seen them play in matches refereed by referees they don't know, the way they behave in those games as to how they behave with me is very different, because they think, oh, Ed's a friend and he's also the referee, and that can be difficult because it's difficult to kind of set boundaries, really. So yeah, that's tough.
And in terms of conditions, I think Rome was the hardest.
What do you think?
Oh, it was very hard in terms of conditions, because 3 games a day, hour-long games, like the heat was unbelievable. And being on the line, I think I've probably had more worse games as an assistant than I have in the middle. I've had some terrible abuse on the line. And also one game that sticks in my mind was I was at Ipswich Town, and Mick McCarthy was watching, and he's just an absolute cockhead. He was just, there was a goal that wasn't offside that he was sure was offside, even though he was sitting on his umbrella 20 yards from the touchline. And he would not let me forget that this goal was not offside until they reviewed it on video after. And he still never came up to me and apologized for all the abuse he gave me. Yeah. So generally just avoid professional football.
and I hate when you're being an assistant, I hate being assistant on the dugout side. I mean, I'd happily take a bit of abuse from fans on the other side of the pitch, but the non-stop abuse you get by the dugouts is just, well, yeah.
When you next come to Australia, Ed, I'm going to have to get us both to do a game, and I'll be in the middle, and I'll say I'll get Football Queensland to give you a free pass for one game as an experience, and we'll podcast it as well. We'll do like a before and after, and it'll be a great experience.
I don't want to be mic'd up for that game. I mean, all you hear is me huffing and puffing for 90 minutes.
I'm 50 years old. Remember that, Adam. Cool.
Anyway,
right.
So there we go.
Next?
That's the post bag. Let's get on to, because
Law
we've already
6.
spent Law 6 spent a lot of time on our news and our post bag. So law number 6, the other match officials. It has, like all the other sections, it has sort of subdivisions within it. There's a general introduction which really just says the blindingly obvious, which is that other match officials are the assistant referees, the 4th official, and then when you've got VAR, you've got assistant VARs, VAR officials, and that's about all the introduction really says, isn't it? I think of note. Then section 1 is assistant referees. And it's probably just worth recapping as to what the ambit of assistant referees' responsibilities are. They are to indicate when the whole of the ball leaves the field of play, i.e. when it's a corner or throw-in, and which team is entitled to a corner, goal kick, or throw-in. A player in an offside position. Indicate when a substitution
it
is
also
requested.
says a player in an offside position may be penalised, because obviously being in an offside position is not necessarily against the law of the game. Yeah,
correct. And then for penalty kicks, they're to keep an eye when the goalkeeper is moving off the goal line before the ball's kicked and when the ball crosses the line.
Does that come up in the penalty kick for restarts? Because that's probably worth chatting about, isn't it? How to manage that situation? Do you think, or not?
Yeah,
sure.
I think
I
so.
I just briefly, I always say to my assistants, look, unless the ball from a penalty, unless the keeper saves it, there's no decision to be made. So if the penalty taker misses it and the goalkeeper's off the line, just leave it. He's missed the target. Who cares, right? Just move on. And also, I'm like, if the goalkeeper's off the line, he has to be like literally on the 6-yard line or closer to the penalty spot or penalty mark. Like, it has to be the most obvious decision in the world for us to give it. If not, just let the penalty be the penalty. Because at the end of the day, if a striker can't score a penalty, then really and truly he shouldn't be taking it. And it's always the attacker's fault. So I always kind of give the goalkeeper probably more lenience than you might think if you look at it in terms of the letter of the law, simply because it's such a hard thing to actually give and to sell.
No, very good point. The final part about the assistant referees, part 1 section, is the assistant referee may enter the field of play to help control the 10-yard distance. So that's when there's an issue about the distance of a ball from the free kick or distance away from the corner. Section number 2, well, this talks about the fourth official. So we're not talking about grassroots level here. So we're talking about your sort of level, Adam. But what it says is that the fourth official is there to supervise the substitution procedure, checking a player's equipment who's coming on, to deal with the re-entry player following a signal or approval from the referee.
Which they would have had at Stevenage.
Yes. Supervising the replacement balls, indicating the minimum amount of additional time the referee intends to play at the end of each half, and inform the referee of irresponsible behaviour by any technical area occupant. So,
or all of the technical area.
Yes. So that's really the fourth official. And obviously, those responsibilities at grassroots level are the referees. Because unless you're doing affiliated football games where you've got assistants, you're responsible for doing all those things.
You are.
And even when you've got sort of club assistants helping you out, it's still your responsibility to do all of that sort of stuff yourself. You have fourth officials presumably for your matches, do you?
No, not all of them, no.
Don't you?
No. So we just share the responsibility. We only have fourths you have fourth official on the NPL and finals, but other than that, nah. So I just give that responsibility to my assistant, senior assistant. You do subs. Because
that raises the question, which you kind of just answered, which was something I sort of discovered when I was digging up the fun facts for today, which is you presumably will know who the most senior of your assistants is, and will you have had a discussion about who will take over in the middle in the event that you can't?
Yeah. So when we get appointed, we get appointed an AR1, AR2, but that's fluid anyway. And then, so I always go on seniority, who's been refereeing the longest, or I go on who I've refereed with before. And then who takes over if I get injured, it will be my senior assistant. So it's always the assistant who's on the dugout side. So equally, I have to take that into account when I make that decision as well. And also sometimes with the fourth official, I have to say, depending on who I think the fourth official is, I'll be like, look, if I get injured, you're going to go to the assistant, and then the assistant's going to come and finish the game for me.
I can't remember.
Because the fourth official is the fourth official is technically the reserve. Is technically the reserve referee.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. They're meant to be the sort of the next most senior person out there, who's then will take over in the event that you were
injured,
incapacitated, or injured. Yeah. Okay. Part number 4 says reserve assistant referee. Crikey.
No, you didn't do additional. You didn't do the additional assistant referees, which were brought in for the Champions League, weren't they? To stand on the goal line. Let's just leave that. There's no
you know,
need to talk about
it's
it.
so ridiculous. When I looked at this law again and went to look again at additional assistant referees, I was suddenly reminded of that period when we had those bloody idiots being given wands behind the goal.
Mark Clattenburg was one of those idiots once upon a time. You just remember that.
Do you remember they were given those sorts of illuminated wands that air traffic controllers have?
Yep.
I mean, it was absurd.
And then they weren't allowed to make the decision anyway because it was the referee's decision still.
And they were introduced. They still feature in the laws of the game. That's the bizarre thing.
But they're not in any competition.
I don't think they're used in any competitions.
Yeah,
I'm
not surprised.
They,
plus, an extra 2 referees on the Champions League would have cost you a fortune, right? To send them to every game. You've now got you've got an extra third of your wage bill to deal with: travel costs, hotel costs, food costs, everything. Like, it's just absurd.
Well, I suspect that VAR's really kind of done away with the need for it, hasn't it?
That makes sense.
But they still feature in the laws. They still feature in some of the diagrams about position of where they should be. And I was looking.
They won't much longer, though, will they?
Well, I don't think so. But they are still part of the laws. I think that they were first introduced. I was looking at this for fun facts. I think they were first introduced in about 2010.
Okay.
For about the first time. And I think they featured in sort of one of the big tournaments in about 11 or 12. And I remember reading a fact about how I think the first time they were used in UK football, I think they were used in the Scottish Cup final or something. But they seem to have gone, don't they? I mean, I haven't seen a match with the extra wanded officials.
They're a footnote.
For some time, but
sorry,
that was part 3.
That's okay. And then VAR, which we know about, which I don't think we need to go into because I don't think anyone who listens to this is using that. And if they are, they'll know a lot more about it than both of us will. So I think we can leave that there. And then it tells you all the signals. Yeah,
and then, you know what? I wanted to talk about one set of signals because I think most lay people and I think most footballers aren't alive to this. Like we said before, if you want to know the correct positioning, go to the IFAB website, go to the FA website, look at the laws, because there's some lovely diagrams of stick men waving and shaking their flags. But just insofar as offside decisions, I don't think a lot of people realise that when an assistant gives an offside position, he is indicating by the position of his flag where on the pitch is the player who is infringing the offside law. Because I think most people just think, oh, it's an offside decision. But if a assistant points his arm straight forward in what most people consider to be the classic offside flagging position, that's indicating that was in the middle of the pitch. If the arm is elevated, you're talking about the further side of the pitch from where the assistant is. And if he's pointing the flag more towards the ground, it's indicating that it was the player nearest to the assistant. And I don't think people realise that,
All I want to say about the signals is in every single one of those diagrams, the assistant referee has a straight arm.
Yes.
And their feet together.
We have said before about the straight arm being a very, very important thing.
Don't you be coming onto my pitch with a bent arm. I will shout at you for it. Like, as a joke, but I will still tell you to get the arm straight.
Now, one signal that's not on the signals is the signal for a penalty.
That's because they got rid of it. It's no longer
they changed
flag
it
across the chest, and it's just you indicate like a free kick now.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Because it went to being an arm across the chest. It was something else before that, wasn't it?
I'm not sure, but they got rid of it going. They got rid of putting the flag across the chest because it drew too much attention to the assistant giving the decision, as opposed to the referee. And also equally, it an obvious cross. So if the assistant gives a penalty and the referee doesn't, this is really obvious. Whereas if the hand is already, if it's in your hand, you go up and you go down as if it's a free kick, or that you could be pointed to a corner or something like that. It's a little bit more disguised, and it gives the team, like the refereeing team, an easier way out if there's a conflict of decision.
Yeah. I know that we keep sort of saying when we have our guests on, we'll talk about this topic and that topic, but I would quite like it when we do have guests on to talk about this. I know we said we were going to talk about people's sort of pre-match routines and what they say to their assistants, but it is fascinating, learning the skill of how to communicate decisions, to the referee, or give an indication as to what you think has happened without actually necessarily flag. I mean, there's a whole world of communications that's sort of not secret communications, but it's a fascinating sort of thing, which you don't really learn about until you're actually in that position.
Yeah,
so we will talk about that at some other point.
We need to keep a list of this, don't we?
I know we do. Part 7, funnily enough, is that bloody picture of the additional assistant referees with their wands.
With his wand, I know.
And it's, I mean, what and I don't even understand what it says. Goal brackets unless the ball has very clearly passed over the goal. I mean, what?
I wouldn't worry.
What does that mean?
I wouldn't worry.
Anyway,
that is the other match officials. Should we go into Should we quickly go into what makes a good assistant?
Yeah, I think it'd be really helpful. Actually, it's what makes a good assistant.
So, what do you think?
What makes a good assistant? Well, okay.
I finally stumped him with a question.
Yeah, okay. Let me just I'll do a bit of stream of consciousness, really, and tell you the sort of things that come into my mind. The first is, I think, really, really important about, I'm always bleating on about your position on the pitch and making sure that you're in line with the second last man, so you've got some validity to your decision making. And I don't say that lightly, because I've been an assistant on some semi-professional football matches. Things are happening quickly. 18-year-olds who are sort of fit and agile, fun enough, can run pretty quick, certainly quicker than my aging bones. And it's really hard work. People think that being an assistant is just a question of standing by and watching most of the game, are very, very wrong about that, because that aspect's particularly tough. And the other is, and again, I'm not going to go into too much detail because I think we all talk about in the future, but it's that communication that you can have with the referee, where there are signals that you can give the referee, or the referee can give to you, so that you're both indicating what your view is of something that's happened, to assist them. And I'll just give a classic example. When there's a throw in, and as the assistant, you're not particularly sure, but you got a good idea, but you're not sure. You put your flag into the hand for the team which you're giving it to. And so the referee, if he didn't see it, has got an idea, but if he's sort of in any doubt at all, he can sort of see what your view about it was. Mm-hmm. Just little things like that, I think, that can make the sort of game run more smoothly from an official's point of view. What do you think are the key things for a good assistant?
I think good pre-match communication. There's nothing worse than when I send a text to an assistant referee and never get a response about what time they're going to be at the game, what's going on in their day. Just acknowledge receipt of communication. Then when you get to the game, turn up on time. That's always good. Be dressed properly. That's always good. Have your kit, which is always good. All things which have happened to me that haven't quite been right. I think for me, I like building rapport. My assistant's the best. So, as an assistant, I've always viewed it as an opportunity to learn, because most of the time, if I'm an assistant, I'm going out with someone who's better, who's higher up than I am, who's been doing it longer than I am, who's more experienced than I am. So, I'm always looking to try and find things that I might be able to learn from them. I'm always looking, how do they run their warm up? How do they do their pre-match? Be inquisitive as an assistant referee. I don't mean unless you're out with me, feed my ego. But, with other referees, don't necessarily feed their ego, but be insightful. Show them that you want to do well. Show them that you're there to learn, but you also want to do a really good performance. And that performance relies on you understanding the referee in the best way possible. I also would say, relax, be relaxed, be willing to have fun. When it comes to the actual game, execute what the referee's asked for very well. Even if it's different to what you normally do. Don't just say, yeah, I'll do that in your pre-match, and then when it comes up, just go back to what you normally do. Also be willing to change the way you're acting on the pitch based on the referee's situations as well. So be adaptable. But I think one of the most important things that makes a really good assistant referee across all levels, and it's something everyone who's listening to this can implement tomorrow or today on their games, is take your time and let the players tell you what the decision is.
Yeah.
And if you can implement both of those things, your game as an assistant referee will go threefold. It will get better threefold. Just take your time. I say to all my referees, all my assistant referees, I want eye contact first.
I was just going to jump in with that because eye contact is something that is really, really important. And sometimes you can be a bit consumed by what you're doing as assistants and forget that, you are part of a team.
Yep.
And so it's really important to be keeping that eye contact with the referee. But yeah.
I want eye contact first. And then I want us to acknowledge that we both know what the decision is and we're going the right way. So we do that with our finger pointing down below, down by the sides, like you said, with the assistant and flag. And then I'll just nod and I'll go, yep. And I'll say, yep, let's have it. Let's have it. Let's have the decision. And by the time we've gone through that process, the players already know what the decision is anyway, because they've already got the ball in their hands. And then we're just following in after them rather than dictating to them what's going on. The tight ones, take your time a little bit more. And also what I say is the more over the easy ones, the more we take our time, the more we have eye contact, the more we build that rapport between the three of us. The players will sense that. The players will see that we're in control, we're in charge, we know what we're doing, we're together, and that will give them confidence in our ability as well. So I think that's really that's the easiest way to be a good referee. Take your time, look for eye contact all the time, and don't be over. What's the word? It's better to be a little slower with decisions than over eager with decisions as an assistant.
I agree with that. Yeah,
because then you're still allowing the referee to have control, and then you can change based on what you've heard the referee say or referee do, even if you disagree, because you took your time. Whereas there's nothing worse than you crossing and you both mixing up a decision, because then the referee has to either hang you out to dry or hang himself out to dry. And 9 times out of 10, I'll hang myself out to dry because I know it's easier for me to recover, and I don't want shit falling back on the assistant. But sometimes it's not possible, and then you end up with conflict in the team, and that's not nice either.
So there we go. That's law number 6 sorted. Law number 7, just so to whet people's appetites for the.
How is it we're up to law 7 and we haven't discussed a foul, or we haven't discussed anything really relating to actual football?
Well, you're going to be disappointed if you expect that to happen next week.
Isn't it the duration
of the match? Which thank God we've got a post bag and news to deal with. Otherwise, It's going to be.
So this is a direct appeal to everyone who's listening. We need as many questions as possible for next week, because a game is 90 minutes long with 2 equal halves of extra time
and a half time. Yeah, exactly. So
what is it? That has to be minimum 10 minutes, but no longer than 15 minutes in direct. Sorry. There you go. That's episode 7.
Done now. We can jump to the equally exciting law 8, which is the start and restart of play.
That is quite interesting, actually. That's more interesting than everything else. However, when I first thought of this idea for the podcast, I thought it would be really intriguing. We'd educate people. It'd be great. Yeah. Going through the laws. I didn't realize the first 7 were this dull.
I forgot there were so many really quite boring
laws. No wonder I've never really fully read them back to back, cover to cover, because I'll probably get through the first 3 pages. I'm like, this is as dull as anything.
Yeah, if I'm refreshing my memory of the laws, if I'm ever going to a game, having a break or whatever, you're skipping quite a way forward into the laws before you actually get to anything that you need to worry about. And it's just my horror, my sort of nightmare is those sorts of scenarios we talk about, things like the Stevenage game, that sort of stuff. The sorts of stuff, the majority of laws, you have no difficulty applying. It's just occasionally something happens which, doesn't immediately fall fairly squarely into it.
Like I say, with those weird situations, if you know something's wrong, stop play and then just think logically through it. Just take your time. So many referees get into problems when they try and do things fast and they're not thinking logically. If you can't get it right quick, get it right slow. And I would say you're going to have to get it right slow more often than than quick. It's just be willing to take your time. No one cares as long as you get the right decision.
Yep, no, I agree with that. So all that leaves us is with my fun facts.
Yes, let's go. Oh, wait, cue jingle. It's now time for Ed's fun facts.
Amazing. So first question, Adam, how old do you have to be in the UK? I'm afraid I don't know about Australia because I'm not really bothered about that. How old do you have to be a referee in the UK?
13 years old.
No, you have to be 14. 14
Oh,
and over to be a
so
referee
close.
in the UK. Assistance flags. So first of all, how did referees first signal at the very beginnings, the origins of the game, their decision-making processes? How did they alert
With
the
their
players?
Arms?
No, but it wasn't with a whistle. It was usually with something like a handkerchief or something like that. Can you believe it? That in the pre-whistle days,
just floating, just like waving a white flag. I give up.
Yeah,
I give up.
exactly.
I'm surrendering.
But flags, assistance flags. How do you think they came about? Any ideas?
No, not a clue.
So apparently, at the very beginnings of affiliated football, the assistant would use something like a pennant or something from the home teams.
Right.
So the pennant would be usually in the colours of the team, and sometimes they weren't particularly clear, and so a decision was taken by a gentleman. I'll tell you about in a minute. He's an interesting chap to do these brightly coloured flags. But in terms of flag colours, traditionally, once they were introduced, there was one red flag and there was a yellow flag.
Yeah.
Do you know which of the flags the more senior assistant referee would have been given?
Yellow.
No. There we go. 50-50, and you got it wrong. It was red.
I was so on form last week as well. It was red.
It was red.
Okay.
And the only explanation I can find for that anywhere, and I found it on various sources on the internet, so it kind of makes you think it is true, is the simple fact that R came before Y in the alphabet. So the idea was most senior person was R, and then the second one was yellow. Now, the next question I was going to ask you is, when did referees start wearing what we consider to be the usual referee's outfit of being in black?
What year?
Yeah.
1952.
That's not bad, actually.
Not bad. You.
It was 1946.
Oh, I knew it'd be post-war. I didn't think it'd be that post-war.
It was post-war, but I've been reading a lot about a fascinating individual who is called Ken Aston.
Can I just interlude here? Fascinating to Ed. To the listeners, the jury's out.
Listen, you don't know how hard it is to trawl the internet to find fun facts about assistant referees.
I know how hard it is to bloody make a jingle for your fun facts.
So Ken Aston, by the way.
Yes, sorry, Ken.
Not someone I'd heard of before, but he has had a huge impact on the game. And I'll tell you why. He came back from military service in 1946, and he is said to be the first league referee to wear the black uniform as we now consider it to be, right? Wow. And before that, can you believe it? Referees would wear things like tweed jackets and sort of double cuff shirts and like.
Well, they're probably taking the lead from like cricket, weren't they? Do you think?
Yeah, and they were wearing like +4s and things like that. It was all very sort of civilized.
Wait, what's a +4?
You know, golfers wear sort of trousers that come down to the knee.
Right. You know. Okay. No, I don't know. I'm not posh like you are.
So he was responsible.
We didn't all go to private boarding school, Edward. We're not all Winchester lads.
God, how disappointing. So he started wearing the black uniform with white trim, and the story behind it was apparently he was sort of digging through equipment from work and sort of saw sort of black and white jacket or something. He thought that'd be a good idea. Yeah. And so he started off. And he's also, can you believe it, the person responsible for introducing the assistance flags.
How interesting. Good old Ken. Yeah. That is fascinating. I'll take it
1947, he introduced bright yellow linesman's flags in place of the pennants and the colours of the home teams, which have been used before. Isn't that mad?
That is. While we're on the topic, can I put out an appeal?
Yeah.
Now, since I got to Australia, since I took up refereeing again, I've desperately wanted to get my hands on touchline flags. Now, I don't need buzzer flags, just touchline, like ordinary, like normal touchline flags, because I love the handles on them. And I refuse to buy flags here in Australia that aren't the touchline ones, and you can't get them here. And I'm not even sure you can get touchline flags anymore because the company that did supply them, A&H International, have now gone out of business. So I don't know where to get them from. Can't seem to get them from anywhere. So if anyone is listening to this that doesn't referee anymore, that has touchline flags in their loft or in their attic or in their garage or something, please send me a message and I will happily purchase them from you, because I want the proper handle touchline flags that rotate properly. I miss them. I love them. And it would just complete my full circling journey of coming back to refereeing.
Anything else you want to say? You want any other wish lists?
I mean, 100 grand would be nice.
A new pair of jeans. Do you like to tell the listeners your size and sort of preference for make? I mean, crying out loud. Good Lord.
Well, what's the point in building a platform if you can't use it from time to time?
What was the year where the officiating bodies stopped referring to linesmen and said that we should all call them assistant referees?
2002.
No, just before that. You might think that the world of football being so out of date, it would have been later, but it's about 1996 when that happened.
Oh, it's just that was my second guess. I was about to say 1996. That was literally what I was about to say.
And the practice of having a named replacement referee as the sort of fourth official, all right, that was by Ken Aston as well. Ken Aston introduced that.
Wow.
And do you know when that was?
1962.
1966.
Oh,
that happened
for the World Cup. Have you noticed a lot of these decisions generally happen around Euros or World Cups?
Yeah. And just I was right when I was saying earlier about when they introduced the wanted additional assistant referees. It was, I think, 2009, 2010 UEFA Europa League group stage was when
it was Europa League, was it? Okay, cool.
Yeah, and it was extended in 2011, 2012 to the Champions League, and it was used in the Euros at 2012. And it was then approved by IFAB in July 2012. I think they were
the other thing we didn't cover about the other match officials, just quickly, was that if a referee gets incapacitated or an assistant gets incapacitated and you have no fourth official, you have no one else who can do it, then technically you're meant to go to the fans and ask if there are any qualified referees there. And interestingly, this happened to Michael Oliver, and his wife was sat in the stands and she had to finish the game for him.
Oh, there we go. And what am I going to give any more?
That's my fascinating fact for the day.
Just before we finish, I mean, I could talk about Ken Aston for hours and end.
I'll write the forward for you. You write the book on Ken Aston.
I'm going to post about Ken on our Facebook page, because Ken is the main man. Finally, record
father of referee
for the most yellow and red cards in a sort of top flight game is what? How many?
11.
No, do you know what? It's mad. It was 20 cards. 16 yellow cards and 4 reds.
Wow, that is mad. What was the game?
It was a game. It was a World Cup game between Portugal and Holland in 2006.
Oh wow!
That took place in Nuremberg. And if you search "battered Nuremberg" on the internet, you'll hear all about it, because that's how it's been labelled. There we go. I had other fun facts, but we've run out of time, Adam.
We are out of time. But it's been a pleasure. Stop going on holiday so we can do this more regularly.
I'll try my best.
All right, my friend.
Anyway, lovely speaking to you. Please write in with your questions and rate and review us, and we'll see you in a week or two's time.
And thank you so much for being here and for listening. We do really appreciate you all so much. Thank you. See you later, Edward.
Bye.
Ciao, ciao.
Thank you for making it to the end of another episode of Red or Yellow. You're clearly a very fit listener. May I gently remind you to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Tell all your friends. And don't forget to please share it with any refereeing groups that you may have. Good luck on the fields out there this week. And if you have any questions, please make sure you send them in to us on social media. Voice notes or written questions would be brilliant. And we will, of course, include them in the podcast. Have the most wonderful day. Ciao, ciao.